This morning we have a special opportunity to continue in our series called "This Changes Everything." We've been in a series for the past 3-4 weeks now called "This Changes Everything," where we've looked at interactions with Jesus, where Jesus runs into people, locks eyes with people, and we have seen how when people run into Jesus, when they have these interactions with Jesus, when they run into the teachings and the way and the heart of Jesus, things change. So we've talked about, in week 1, we talked about how the love of God changes everything. Week 2, we talked about truth, how the truth of God, full of grace and truth, changes everything. And this week, last week we talked about peace, where Jesus is on a boat with his disciples. Their minds are running 1,000 miles an hour as the storm is overwhelming the boat. And they're just anxious, they're afraid, they're accusatory, they're all of these things. And Jesus stands up in the midst of the storm and says, "Peace, be still." And I love in Mark chapter 4 how the story goes on that they said, they looked at Jesus and they looked at one another and they said, "Who is this? Who is this that the wind and the waves obey him?" Now, the rest of the story goes on, and the boat continues to sail on calm seas to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, and their boat comes ashore on land and lands in the region of the Gerasenes. And where they land, there is an infamous person who lives just off of the shore. In Mark chapter 5, we read about a man who lives in the tombs, who was renowned for screaming out night and day, who was renowned for intimidating those who would pass by. You never went to this area where Jesus and his disciples have landed. And so they've just encountered a storm that induced incredible anxiety. They've experienced this incredible awe and wonder of the peace of Christ. And now they've landed on the shore where there is a madman who has been living in a graveyard. Now here's the text in Mark chapter 5. It says this: "They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tomb and in the hills, he would cry out, and he would cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him, and he shouted at the top of his voice, 'What do you want with me, Jesus? What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me. In God's name, don't torture me.' So just after Jesus calms a storm that is overwhelming the disciples, their boat sails to the region of the Gerasenes, where there is a man living in the tombs. And did you notice what it said this man had endured? This man lived in a graveyard. No one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. So let's stop for a minute. Someone had tried to chain this man up, to tie this man down, to capture this man and subdue him. He tore the chains and broke the irons on his feet. Night and day among the tombs, he would cry out in agony." So here is a man. What gets a person to a place where they live in a graveyard by themselves? What gets a person to a place where they are gashing themselves with stones just to feel? This man who lived in the tombs has endured much trauma, has endured much in his life, much pain, much suffering, hurts and wounds and afflictions, probably mistakes that he had made. He is riddled with shame and guilt and affliction. There are these impure spirits that are possessing him and driving him. All of these memories, all of this trauma, all of this torment, so much so that he runs to Jesus. What makes him run to Jesus? Something in him makes him run to Jesus, fall on his knees before Jesus. And did you catch what he said to Jesus? "Don't torture me. Don't torment me." Why would he think that Jesus was there to torment him? Why would he think that Jesus was there to torture him? Maybe because torture and torment and trauma and abuse marked this man's life and this man's story, so much so that that's how he even related to the Son of God. Today, we're going to talk about trauma. Why are we talking about trauma? Because we've all endured some level of pain and hurt and woundedness. We have all endured some level of shame or abuse. We've all endured something like that, or we know someone who's been impacted by that. And we believe that though trauma changes a lot of things, that there is healing on the other side of that. And so to do this and to have this conversation, I've invited Amanda Caldwell to come up and share with us today. Amanda is a licensed marriage and family therapist here locally, a part of our church. And we're just going to have a conversation about trauma before we wrap up the story in Mark chapter 5. So, you know her. She's awesome. If you don't know her, you will know her, and she is awesome. And so give Amanda Caldwell a big round of applause. Come on up, Amanda. It's got to keep going until she touches the stage. Oh, you're good. Oh, I'm joking. All right, Amanda.
Is this working?
It's working.
Okay.
You're on.
Cool. Thank you for inviting me up here. I am so excited to be here to talk about trauma. It's not something you typically do on a Sunday morning for church. So if you guys don't like it or you're not in the space for it, just blame him. Right?
Yeah, you can just blame me.
I found it's the healthiest thing.
Yeah.
As coming from a marriage and family therapist, it's healthy just to blame the pastor.
Blame the pastor. My email address is Jordan, Jordan, at slocity.church.
Well, I just want to start. So we're going to I'm going to share and we're going to kind of dialogue a little bit through this time. But I have the honor to work with people through their trauma stories. And what I have found is that it looks and breathes differently for each person, this thing that we call trauma. So I feel like we tend as a community to shy away from using the word trauma for our own lives because we might have thoughts like, it is so much worse for other people. They have it so much worse than me. Or maybe something like, it can't be that big of a deal. It happened to me so long ago. Or maybe even something like, it's just anxiety. This is going to pass. But trauma is everywhere. You really can't avoid it. In fact, I'm convinced, like you had just said, that every one of us have had some sort of contact with trauma in our lives. For example, we've all gone through this thing called the pandemic. Do you remember it?
I don't. What was it? Could you refresh our
So let
memory?
me just tell you, we went through this thing. We probably might still be going through it. Yeah. But fear of maybe losing a loved one or not being able to see a loved one, financial stress, kids being out of school. What would you say? What are some examples?
Yeah, I think going back to the initial of like, oh, it's only 15 days, and then it became 15 weeks, and then it became just a lot of unknowns and uncertainty, and seeing even like some of the things that our kids experience and some of their nervousness of even going into a store and forgetting their mask. I remember Isla was 7, and she started hysterically crying in the middle of Old Navy because she didn't have her mask on.
Oh my goodness.
And it was like, even that, like that's what comes to my mind.
Yes. Life as we knew it was changed.
It's a weird time.
It was different,
Yeah.
so weird. And it was gone.
Yeah.
So my notes are just like, there we go. So life changed for us.
Yeah.
And, even for me, you could be like me and just be totally anxious that you're going to run out of toilet paper. But even now, when we go to the grocery stores and we know, like, those shelves are fully stocked with Charmin, you might find yourself getting a little anxious when your supply runs low. I use this as a silly example because this is trauma. Yeah. We might not all have this long-term traumatic response to the pandemic, but life is full of really big emotions, and if we learn to lean into them and look inward, we might just find capacity to heal and grow.
Yeah.
So can I share an example?
Please share examples.
I'm just going to put that there. I don't need to hold it.
I'm just here for comic relief to keep things light.
So I have a friend. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. It's good to have laughter when you talk about trauma. I actually think it's kind of fun to talk about trauma, but that's my field. Trauma is really, really hard, so I am not saying that this is a light topic, but sometimes it's nice to laugh a little. I have a friend who recently had panic attack while he was on a work Zoom call, and actually he was having a lot of them. and he could not figure out why he was in this work situation and having this these feelings of feeling frozen. Finally, he was able to trace back how he was feeling on that call to a time when he was a child and his mom and stepdad were going through a divorce. And I use this as an example to show that when we leave trauma unchecked, it sometimes shows up in our lives in out of place. Our emotions are out of place.
Yeah.
They don't connect to it.
Yeah.
So, did you
Yeah,
have a...
no, I love that. I mean, I think about times in my own life where I'm like, why did I respond like this? Why did I act like this? Where did this come from? Why was I stressed? Why was I sharp or short? Or why was I overwhelmed in that season where it seemed like everything was kind of calm? Usually it happens to me when I'm in a time of rest, you know, and when I actually let down a little bit, that's when something will come up that I haven't. And I love what you said, unchecked. So what is trauma?
Yes, that's what I was going to ask.
Oh.
That's so good. It's like we planned it. I want to go back really quick to that story of my friend. I will go back to that story because I think it's really important, the friend who was having the panic attack.
Yeah.
So, but what is trauma? I want you guys to think about right now, like words that pop into your head of what would describe trauma. So it could be, I'm guessing, you might think of like a house fire or combat violence or maybe poverty, abuse. What are some words? Are you having anything pop into your head?
I think about times when bones were broken, you know, sporting accidents. Yeah, sporting accidents or, traumatic falls as a kid or getting hit in the face with a baseball when I was in fifth grade, you know, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and those are all real traumas.
Yeah.
The mental health field suggests that trauma moves beyond just that one big time travesty experience. So when you experience trauma, it's not just that one time. It could be something that happened in your childhood. It could be an everyday encounter. And it shows up in these ways, these sneaky ways, repeating patterns in your life. So when you experience trauma, you are all of a sudden suddenly no longer in control of what's happening around you. It creates this, it's characterized by a feeling of helplessness and then overwhelms your ability to cope. Can I say that again? It's characterized by a feeling of helplessness and it overwhelms your ability to cope. So you can imagine that feeling of helplessness is common among children. So some examples of childhood trauma would be as obvious as like physical or sexual abuse or neglect. It could also be something where someone told you to not cry, to dismiss your emotions, being bullied, a move, parents getting a divorce, being a part of a group that's marginalized. This list can go on and on.
Yeah.
And these things can be traumatic in adulthood. I just highlight them because when they happen when you're a child, they're really formative on who you are. And there's a statistic, it's 64% of adults in the US have experienced at least one childhood trauma. And I think that it's probably more for many of us.
Yeah.
So some examples for adulthood trauma, experiencing or witnessing violence, the loss of a loved one, an accident, an illness, a high stress environment, spiritual abuse. I mean, this list is not comprehensive. It can go on and on as well, but I'm just trying to hopefully help you see some of the common traumatic experiences we all have.
Yeah.
So, so let's see. Oh yeah, I just wanted to highlight one thing. I think it's really important to recognize that people respond differently to experiences, and so you can't define trauma by looking at the experience. What happens is we all respond differently to things. One person could be in a car accident and be dramatically impacted by it, and another person could be in a car accident and unfazed. So it's really important to not look at the event and define that as trauma, but trace it to the emotions and to the feelings.
I think that's really interesting. To say, and to go like, oh, I had a car accident, I had trauma, but actually recognize the emotions that you're feeling. And I don't know about many of you, but I wasn't necessarily trained in how to even like notice the emotions that I was feeling. I was an emotional kid, but then I was so emotional as a kid, I would just suppress it because I didn't even know. And then I got into a season where I didn't even know how to express what I was feeling. And so I think that's interesting to say, like, don't notice the experience, but or
the event.
But notice the underlying. How do you do that? Like, what are some symptoms that we could look for?
Yeah. Well, so that's the first step is awareness. That really is. You can't change something you're not even aware you're doing. Actually, I'm going to say that again.
Okay.
Just because I think it's kind of profound. You can't change something in your life you're not even aware that you're doing. So let me go back to my friend who was having these panic attacks and on these really benign work calls. And he's sitting in this chair and cannot figure out why he's feeling frozen, frigid, overwhelmed. And so after a lot of time and work, he was able to realize what he was feeling on that call. I'll say other feelings. He was feeling trapped. He said he wanted to run away. He's just in his, office having these calls.
Doing business.
And felt helpless. And trying to remember, I think I said overwhelmed. But he was able to recognize, like, wow, that feeling, I have had that feeling before in my life. And he connected it to this time when he was a little boy. It was pretty traumatic, this mom and stepdad getting a divorce. That when that was happening, he was feeling helpless, trapped, had all of this fear. So the first step for him, going back to you asking what do you do, awareness, is for him in that call to figure out what am I feeling in this call. So he said he was feeling frozen, and then to go underneath that, what's the underlying emotion? And for him, it was fear. So anyways, so he was able to trace it back to this time. He had all of these memories pop into his mind, and it opened this door for him to have this beautiful healing and understanding of this thing that, he kind of, just like you said, maybe pushed it aside, didn't explore it, didn't feel comfortable feeling it, just kind of moved through life.
Or wasn't in a safe place to even had anybody in his life that made it okay to even say, I feel this way.
Or yes. Yeah. And so then in doing so, it allowed him in the current present time then to be on the Zoom call, to be able to recognize, I'm not trapped, I'm not helpless. In fact, I am an adult. I'm capable of responding to these situations. He could be grounded in his chair, all of these cool techniques that he can use. And then he was able to have this healthy Zoom call without panic attacks, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
So awareness is important.
Yeah.
And then I just wanted to share, let's see. I want to make sure I don't get ahead of myself. Isn't this fun? I do have to say, I'm really grateful for two things in this moment. One, I'm grateful that it's not really hot and sunny.
Yes.
I'm loving this fall weather.
Thank you, Lord.
Two, I'm really grateful, Brent, that you brought me up here to talk about mental health.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not something we do on Sunday mornings, and I really appreciate creating that space for it.
God is this is off script, but I just think God is the designer of our minds, hearts, souls, and everything is connected. So our mental health touches our emotional health, touches our relational health, touches our spiritual health, and I think we see that in Jesus. And so I'm grateful that for a place and a collection of people that's willing to talk about this. And even saying the word trauma is a little, I think, probably triggering to some.
Yeah.
And so
yes.
What are some things that you do even in like I feel like I'm in a counseling appointment right now. And so what are some things that you do that are unique, that help people kind of acknowledge what they're going through?
I do this really cool thing. I wanted to just now do something like make a joke about being a therapist with you, but I'll just, stick to this.
Okay.
Therapists aren't funny, so I do this really cool thing with clients, actually. I love this. We create this thing called a trauma loss timeline. Have you done one?
I have.
You have?
I have.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Was it hard?
Yeah, it was painful, but it was really enlightening to walk through. You can explain what the grief and loss and trauma chart is.
Yeah. So what I do, I get this big piece of paper, I put it on my coffee table with a client, draw this line, and we basically just start to put loss or trauma that they've experienced in their life. The interesting thing is that when they start, they tend to put 2 or 3 things on the chart, and then over the span of a couple weeks, they come in and then just remember all of these other things that they've experienced in their lives.
Yeah.
So this is the thing. Trauma does this thing to our brains. It makes us feel like what we've experienced isn't important. So they can't remember in that moment all of their loss and trauma. It takes time because when you experience trauma, your body actually, you detach. You're able to detach from your body. It's like this survival mechanism. It's beautiful, really, that we can do that. The tricky thing, though, is that while it's essential in the immediate danger to be able to detach, it's not healthy for us long-term when we aren't experiencing that immediate danger to then continue to be detaching, pushing it away. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes me think of like Stockholm syndrome, like people who have been in prison for a long time and then they are released from prison. They don't even know how to live in a free reality, or like they kind of long for the things that were in a kind of a way, or like a survivalist who's like out in the woods just surviving. Yeah. Like you're high stress, high anxiety. And so then to like get back to normalcy feels so, I don't know.
Sure. No, I like that. I like how one person put it. She described anxiety starts as a normal response to a danger cue, but it becomes, let me say that again just so we're all listening. Anxiety starts as a normal response to a danger cue, but it becomes pathological when it continues its effect on us without the danger cue.
For simple people like me, explain what pathological means.
It becomes unhealthy.
Unhealthy.
Sure.
Habitual?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a lot of words you could use for that.
That's a big word you used there. Okay.
It becomes like, just unhelpful. Yeah. I feel like that's the kindest way to say that.
Okay.
What I want you guys to do right now is I'm going to list some things, some symptoms of trauma. And I want you to just listen to your body and your heart and see if you resonate with any of these words that I share. Again, it's not going to be too comprehensive, but I will share a lot of them if that's okay. Yeah. Anxiety, depression, irritability, mood swings, difficulty concentrating, physical pain. Sometimes that shows up when we're holding tension in our bodies, zoning out, feeling hyper alert, being withdrawn, feeling shame, guilt, hopeless. Am I repeating myself? Irritable. I know, I've pretty much described humans everywhere. But the thing is these are actually signs of trauma. So the question is, this is kind of the fun part. What do you do about it? Yeah. Right? Yeah. What I would really want to just drive home, if any of you have connected to any of the words that I've shared, or the symptoms and thoughts, I really want you to know that you are not alone. Mm-hmm. There is hope and healing. It is possible. I am here to attest to it in my own life, and I'm here to attest to that for so many lives that I have walked through trauma with. So first, I'll just give you a couple points. I know that you really like your lists or your bullet points, or what do you call them?
I don't know.
You always have 3 steps.
3 steps.
So I'll give you 3 because it's simple. The first thing that's really important to do is to recognize its impact. So this is actually really hard for some people. Yeah. So feel your feels. Take time to explore your emotions and understand what's going on inside of you. Journal. To do that, you can, sometimes for me, it's just walking and praying to God. That can really help me to get to my feelings. But really recognizing its impact on you.
Yeah, I think in talking about this, I think many people are like, why would I do that to myself? Because that is painful, and it's annoying, it's hurtful to go back and to think through things that have happened to you or things that you have done, or things that, or hurts or grief or loss or trauma. But I think that, like you said, like trying to get to a place where you actually feel the things that are happening, yeah, I think I'm just echoing what you said, does bring a greater awareness, because I don't want to be a shell of a person, or I don't want to be this person who's just suppressed everything in my life so much that I don't even know what I'm feeling. You know, I don't even know how to have a real healthy relationship. And so I think that is really powerful and important, to feel your feelings. And as you say that, this is me having a counseling appointment right now. I'm thinking about all the times.
I'll charge him afterward.
About all the times in my life where it's been like, no, don't feel, like you said, like don't cry, don't show weakness, don't show emotion, have it all together. You know, I think that's important for everybody to hear. Like, it's okay to have a good cry. It's okay to feel your emotions. It's okay to wrestle with those. That's good.
Yeah, give yourself permission. Again, this is really hard to do, because sometimes you're afraid that if you go there, you can't get out of it.
Yeah.
So that would lead me into the second part. So first one, recognize its impact. The second one would be to take care of yourself. And I say this because I hesitate to say this because I know the word self-care we all hear a lot. We float it out there a lot, and maybe we're kind of bugged by it by this point. But when you engage in healing from trauma, it takes a lot of energy. You need to take breaks. You need to rest and do things like self-care, like not isolating, pray, mindfulness, deep breathing. What are some self-care things you do?
I run. I sit. I thought of goat yoga. I've never done goat yoga.
You can share other people's examples too.
That's hilarious.
You weren't ready for that.
I'm not into that. Just say it, but it's fine if you are. Yeah. So, anyways, go ahead.
Okay. So obviously Brent doesn't have great self-care examples. We all know how to do self-care, but really, so recognize its impact and take care of yourself, because that's essential. Actually, one thing that's interesting, as a therapist, I'm trained when someone comes in the middle of a trauma, I'm trained to focus on the basics with them. So that's food, sleep, and exercise. So when I'm sitting across the table from someone that maybe lost their husband, I say, this is your job right now. Your job is to work on getting some good sleep. Your job is to eat some healthy meals and to get some exercise. It's been clinically shown that PTSD symptoms improve dramatically when exercise is part of the equation. Our bodies need all of those feel-good chemicals and endorphins. And so take care of yourself is important. So recognize the impact, take care of yourself. Sorry, I went on a tangent. And then the third is to start establishing healthy pathways in your brain. So new thought patterns. I don't even know where I am in my notes. I thought I would go to them, but they're not there. So new thought patterns in response to what's happening in your life. So for like that friend that was on the Zoom calls, it can simply mean changing your environment. So for him, it could be, if he's on a Zoom call experiencing panic attacks, standing up and stretching. It shows that if you are able to like spatially move your body will respond different to that trigger. Yeah. So, and then of course therapists, this is, a plug for the therapy world, but seeing a trauma-informed therapist can be really helpful because there's so many cool techniques and exercises, strategies out there to help you learn, how to understand what's happened in your past and make sure that it doesn't continue to dictate how you are today. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and this makes me think of like Romans 12, where Paul writes, like, do not be conformed to the pattern of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so when you talk about creating new pathways in your mind, like being able to come to God and say, hey, help me renew my mind. Help me to have a new way of thinking about this, a new way of approaching this. Help me to see myself the way you see me. Help me to see my trauma the way you see it. Help me to see this experience the way you. And as a pastor, I would say like that is the powerful thing of even like reading scripture, reading the Psalms, is because it helps me to even retrain like myself to prayerfully think on the way of Jesus, to prayerfully think about what Christina just sang and led us in that song. I am who you say I am, not I am what's been done to me, or I am what he said I was, or she said, but creating those pathways that's a powerful point too.
So powerful.
Yeah.
That makes me think of, I just love that. As therapists, we say really weird things sometimes. One of them, you guys have probably heard this, but our lives are like wet cement. So, have you guys heard that? So it's like,
I heard it on Thursday.
we're standing, I told Brent already, got the go ahead, but it's like right now in your present, you're standing in wet cement. You can look at your past and it's all formed, it's hardened like a sidewalk, and you can go and see, you can learn about yourself and the patterns that have formed. You can even add the layer of where has God been in my life? What has he been doing? But we are not victims of our past. We don't go back and stand in our past. We actually are currently in wet cement. It's so beautiful because we have the power to be who we want to be. We can change those patterns in our lives. We can ask God, have him enter into what we're doing, how we're handling it, and then make new paths, which is very cool.
Yeah. So. I don't think there's anything more gospel or Jesus than that.
Wet cement.
I think it's like, hey, I can take your past and create something beautiful in the future. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, I guess the last part that I want to touch on, you're probably wondering about this.
Oh, I don't know what it is.
You're
but yes.
like, Amanda, what do we do with people in our lives that experience trauma? How do we support them? Is that one of your thoughts?
It is.
Good, because I want to answer that question.
I think that's why we're having this conversation.
Yes,
so yes.
we are.
Yeah.
I think we all have had friends go through really hard times, and we really want to connect with them and know how to help them. And what I have seen, oftentimes, even though our hearts are really good, we tend to kind of just muddy the situation. We're not actually helping the person. And so some things, I want to give you some tangible things that you can do when you have a friend that's going through a hard time. First thing is to recognize, tell yourself, I can't make their pain go away. That's pretty powerful, to accept what is happening. And then to remember that it takes time, it takes rest, and all the appropriate supports for that person to heal. So things that you can do, you can just let them know you're available, you're there for them. That's really powerful, just knowing that this person said, I am here for you. Don't take their feelings to heart if they're irritable or angry. Those are really normal reactions to trauma. And do the practical. So I know we all tend to make a meal for someone, but the practical could be doing their laundry. If it's a friend at school, picking up their notes that they missed from class. It could be picking up their kids. Don't ask them, just do it. So do the practical that you would want in your life. I keep feeling like you're going to say something. Are you wanting to say something?
Nope.
Okay. Feel free, And then letting them, of course, being there without judgment, encouraging them in their daily routines. That's really helpful for them to have purpose. Just continue with the sleep, exercise, food. Maybe suggest, can I go for a walk with you? And then if they want to talk about their trauma, it's important to be calm, to be accepting, and to listen.
To not fix.
To not
prescribe.
fix them. Try not to say things like, "Oh, let's look for the silver lining," or what are other sayings people say? I'm blanking right now, but there's so many things, general phrases that people can say, but really.
I would say even over spiritualizing it. We experienced a miscarriage before Keegan was born, and we had somebody close to us say, "God just needed that little baby more than you did."
Right.
And I wanted to stand up.
Yes.
And yes, that was not helpful.
That is so painful. That is so painful.
And so I think about some of the ways that Jesus, even a couple weeks ago, when Jesus got down in the dirt with the woman who was exposed and in her shame and guilt, and got down on her level, didn't even say anything, just kind of wrote in the dirt. That posture of just getting down low, just sitting with, if they invite you in, or Brene Brown talks about empathy and stepping into the pit with people, not even saying, hey, suck it up.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's good.
It's so important to be able to sit with them in the muck.
Yeah.
But also it's really important to sit outside of the muck if they don't want you in the muck.
Yeah.
And to accept that and be okay with that.
Let's go.
To
Really
trust
good.
that.
Really good.
So I love Brene Brown. Lastly, I just want to say that what I've experienced with people who've gone through trauma and have pursued healing, I've seen them have a deeper sense of self. Their self-esteem is improved. They're healthier in their communication because they've had to do the work and really learn about themselves. It's amazing. And then they have this deeper appreciation for life.
Yeah.
So it creates this beautiful resilience in someone. Adapting to difficult situations is really hard, and it takes a lot of strength. It creates grit, and it's this beautiful resilience.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah.
Going back to the story of the man in the tomb who's riddled with, we don't know what, right? Probably maybe things that he had done, shame that he had, secrets or mistakes, or maybe he had done some horrible things in his life, but probably some horrible things have been done to him as well. And so he's in this situation where it's like he can't get out. And so the safest place for him is a tomb. And I just think about how Jesus even interacts with him. There was something that pulled him to Jesus. He falls down in front of Jesus' feet. Don't torture me, which is a heartbreaking thing to think that God would torture you even more than you're being tortured. And then what I love about Jesus is that he asks this man, what is your name? And I think about that piece that you talk about with acknowledgement of going, we have to even know what it is, what our name is, or what our afflictions are, or what the experiences in us have been. And the guy says, my name is Legion, for we are many. And a legion is a Roman army of 5,000 soldiers. And so this man, and there's a demonic piece to this, but also probably a trauma piece to this, right, of all these things. My afflictions and my pains are many. And I love that Jesus asks him to designate those, of going, well, what is your name? And to actually voice the many afflictions. And Jesus makes it okay to acknowledge. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to fall before Jesus and say, don't torture me. It's okay to say, my afflictions are many. And then Jesus leads him then to a place of healing. And the next time you see him, there's a group of farmers who are going, oh my goodness, this man is standing up and in his right mind. And when you talk about resilience, the beautiful kind of resilience that you see in people who face their trauma and who actually present it to God, bring it before others, like step into it and face it, that grit or that resilience that you see in people, we see in Mark 5 when Jesus says, now I want you to go home and I want you to tell everybody about the way that God has shown you mercy. And I just have this picture of this man going back and other people experiencing healing from their trauma because they see him healed of his trauma. And he's talking about how it's exposed. And I have other, they're gaining strength from the strength that they see in him. They're gaining this hope to it's okay to talk about the things that have afflicted me because I see that there's healing on the other side of it. And that's the hope for us and even why we're having this conversation. And this might be hard for you because it might make you think about things that are difficult. But sometimes what I love about Jesus and what I love about the Lord is that he meets us in the heavy things of life. And it can be really easy to do church and just skip over this topic and be like, why don't we talk about joy? Or why don't we just talk about gentleness? The goodness of God allows us to have conversations like this and to face the depths of us and to bring them together and to have these conversations and to experience healing. And that healing really does change everything. And so I'm really grateful for your wisdom in this and also your faith and the way that all of that is intertwined and the way that your faith leads you to live this out in a real way and to talk about it in a real way. And I'm grateful that we could have this conversation together. I'm rambling a little bit, but a couple takeaways. Maybe find a time and space. Our groups this week, we have a lot of people in groups at home. They actually are going to have the opportunity to fill out a grief and loss trauma chart themselves.
Cool.
And so
I didn't
if
know
you
that.
want that, like, please let us know. Send me an email. It's Brent, B-R-E-N-T, at slowcity.church, and I can get that to you. We can also make that available on the website or on a download via Instagram. I'll do that too. But also, like, maybe take a step of acknowledgement, take a step to bring somebody in. And would you encourage anything else, a step they could take? If you want prayer this morning, we've got people back at the tent who would love to just talk with you, and some resources available.
Yeah, I would just say, just be kind to yourself through all of it, because it can be really hard. But finding someone to enter that journey with you can make it so much easier. So I love that you guys are doing that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Can I put you on the spot?
Yeah.
Can I ask you to pray for us?
Yes, I would love to.
Thank you.
God, we just come before you, and we thank you so much for this morning that we can gather together outside. We need you in our lives. You are our ultimate healer. You are our ultimate friend. You meet us in the muck, and you know our deepest hearts and our needs. And I just come before you, and I thank you that we have you. I thank you that I have you in my life, that you have changed so much in me. I ask that you would help all of us to rely on you, turn to you, remind us of your goodness, and bless us as we enter into this next week. Praise in your name. Amen.